Good afternoon and welcome to our WCAPT webinar in collaboration with House Museum. It is wonderful to see so many people here, and I am pleased to let you all know that you are in for a multifaceted treat as we explore a conceptual art project, heritage conservation, technical and logistical innovation, and the determination of Evan Hall and his team through the aftermath of such a tragic event. I was fortunate to have been able to work with Evan, Ian, and their team on this project. And in the couple of days that we spent together in the field, I was absolutely blown away by the passion and determination they hold. Before we get started with our main program, I'd like to acknowledge that we have a lot of non-members here today. So we'd like to talk a little bit about the Western chapter of APT. We are a volunteer-run, non-profit organization dedicated to promoting the interchange of ideas and knowledge concerning preservation of historic buildings, structures, sites, landscapes, museum artifacts, and related materials, and to further the goals of APT International. Covering California, Nevada, and Arizona, we host events such as tours, workshops, and webinars. We run a robust scholarship program. You can visit our website to learn more about our recent student and emerging professional recipients. And we are looking forward to a 2-day disaster preparedness symposium in Napa Valley in partnership with Napa County Landmarks. That's coming up in March 2026. Look out for more information on that, a call for papers and sponsorship opportunities for Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's our working title. To the familiar faces on the call, thank you for being here. Your continued support as members, sponsors, and participants is what makes all that we do possible. So thank you. Our speakers today are Evan Curtis Charles Hall, Director of House Museum, and one of our WCAPT board colleagues, Ean Frank, President of Significant Structures. You'll also hear a little more from me about Acquire's role in the project. Evan Curtis Charles Hall is an artist, educator, and founding director of House Museum. He spearheads House Museum's mission to revitalize historic landmarks through conceptual art methods, establishing a constellation of project sites where multiple times and histories are activated in the present. He received a BFA from Cooper Union and an MFA CTL teaching certificate and graduate certificate of archaeological sciences from the University of Pennsylvania. Hall has given talks at the University of Haifa, Israel, the University of Fine Arts, Ravenna, Italy, and Thomas Jefferson University College of Architecture. He has processed artifacts from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and archaeological settlement contexts in Bab, Oman. His works of art have been exhibited at the Penn Museum, 41 Cooper Gallery, EFA Project Space, Philomathian Gallery, Automat Gallery, A-Lab in Amsterdam, and the Municipal Archive of Lugo in Italy. Hall lives and works between places, including Los Angeles, New York City, and Paris. As a traditional trades craftsman, Ean Frank physically arrested decay of prominent registered landmarks within the greater Philadelphia area. Most of these sites were cultural assets managed by public institutions. Ian's academic proclivities and sense of ownership propelled him into a leadership role while remaining engaged in physical tasks. As a working foreman and superintendent, Ian managed the rehabilitation of National Trust, National Historic Landmarks, and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. In 2016, Ian put down the tools and became a full-time project manager. Expanding geographically, he continues to manage projects throughout the United States. Within California, he has assisted in the preservation of the San Gabriel Mission, Wilton Theater, Velasco Theater, Egyptian Theater, UCLA Powell Library, Bridgeport Covered Bridge, California State Capitol, Tool Lake Internment Camp, Tower Theater, Pomona YMCA, Hotel Del Coronado, the Schindler House, and the Saban Theater. For his contributions, Ian has received multiple awards from preservation NGOs, including California Preservation Foundation and Arizona SHPO. Ian is founder and president of Significant Structures, LLC, which provides general contracting, specialty contracting, and consultant services for those seeking rehabilitation, restoration, and preservation services. We have a lot to get through today, so please keep yourselves muted and put any questions you have into the chat. We will get to as many of those as we can during a Q&A at the end. Just as a note, this session is being recorded for those who could not make it today and should be available in our YouTube library soon. Finally, I told Evan not to be shy about asking for donations to the project. So for balance, I also ask that those of you who are able, please do not be shy about donating to the project. Evan, Ian, over to you.
Super. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for the great introduction, and thank you to the Western chapter of APT for hosting us. It is great to be amongst fellow preservationists, history lovers, architects, the design community. Yeah, this is important for us to talk about and to gather around this project that likely will not happen again in our lifetime, or at least let's hope not. So without further ado, I will share my screen and run through a couple of slides. All right, super. Well, thank you guys again for having us. We've been working all year on Project Chimney, which started almost immediately after the January 7th fire. Fires, plural. There were multiple fires, but this work has been a labor of love and a serious investment of time and energy and resources into something that has felt rewarding in terms of like the community that has been built up through this project, the homeowners that have been encouraged through this project, but also we have the foresight to see that this preservation work will matter for the next 10 years. So while we've been working diligently for the past 7 or 8 months, we've invested this time into something that we foresee having generational impact, and not just in the landscape, but also in the community of the Pacific Palisades and Greater Los Angeles. So let's begin. Well, firstly, let me actually go back to introduce House Museum. So House Museum is a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit that began in Philadelphia in response to a site being able to see many historic landmarks that were in states of blight or that were underserved in some type of way. And looking at these spaces as spaces of potential, spaces that carried history, places that were designated as landmarks for either architectural significance or historical significance, but places that for some reason had fallen through the cracks and were in need of new life, were in need of new ideas. And so me and a group of artists and architects in Philadelphia at the time began thinking and conceptualizing various programs and renovation strategies for these properties that thought about their life beyond just becoming commercial spaces or multi-family properties or something that has more utilitarian value, but instead thinking about them as becoming places of curiosity, places of beauty, places of encounter, places where the histories of those sites are activated in, let's say, diverse ways. And so House Museum has been working. This is going to be our 10th project site between Philadelphia and Los Angeles. And this is definitely our most ambitious project, but one that is urgent and one that in a way we were positioned to tackle. So for those of you that may or may not know, the Pacific Palisades is a neighborhood that's located on the Pacific Ocean in the Santa Monica Bay on the west side of Los Angeles. It and the city of Altadena experienced radical fires this past January that both lasted 24 days, which was about 3 weeks. And over the course of those 3 weeks, we lost thousands. I believe it's over 15,000 structures that had burned, 57,000 acres that had burned, and 31 reported deaths. And I think it's important for us to just remember that while we'll be talking about chimneys and while we'll be talking about architecture, there are lives that have been seriously impacted by this fire, and families that have been displaced, families that are now considered homeless, families that lost their belongings and are feeling quite disconnected from a location. And we're months out from January, but the lived experience of these people is still a challenge, and is still, many of them have said that they're still fighting, right? They're fighting to survive. They're fighting against the insurance policies, and they're fighting. They're in a fight, right, to preserve the life that they had once known. And so when these fires happened, I did have to evacuate, and luckily I was just displaced for about 10 days. But my home was close to the Palisades, and I had visited the Palisades many times growing up, and had celebrated my 6th birthday at Will Rogers State Park, which is a beautiful state park within the Palisades. And so my heart really was connected to this region. Um, so as soon as the fires happened, me and my board began having discussions about what we could do. And one of House Museum's board members, unfortunately, he lost his home in the Palisades. And so we were in conversation. We had many phone calls. We were very present to the daily evolution of what was taking place on the ground there. And we saw the debris, we saw the devastation, and when you see that much visual pain and calamity, disaster, right? There's something in us that said we have to respond. And so House Museum joined the Pacific Palisades Preservation Coalition, which formed in the Palisades with nonprofit and for-profit arts and cultural organizations to begin having conversations about what could be done to preserve the oral history, the intangible history, but also the physical history that was still intact in the Palisades. And so in those early days, which really feel very distant, but a lot has happened this year. But we wrote this letter, which I'll just read, which was a love letter to the city of Los Angeles. And it says, "We've experienced a catastrophe beyond words. We grieve over the loss of life and property, yet we marvel at the love that has risen throughout our city. California's state of emergency has become a state of radical care. To those who have responded with acts of service, neighborly aid, and financial support, we thank you. As we collectively process this historic disaster, our goal is to envision new futures for local communities and the built environment. Tomorrow will come. Today, we have the ability to determine how we will inhabit it." We take a moment to recall a quote at the foundation of House Museum, and it states, "They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will revive the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations." And that comes from the Isaiah scroll. Our work continues in Los Angeles, and we invited folks to get involved, right? So this was a public statement that the organization had made to encourage, right, people to jump into this disaster in order to remedy, right, the situation in whatever way they could. And because our organization was positioned between conceptual art, architecture, and historic preservation, we developed this approach, which would be what we are now referring to as Project Chimney. So in those early days, which is, I guess, would be February and March, we began conducting ground surveys. We gained contractor passes to assess various properties, to take pictures of the surviving architectural remains, and we were able to locate over 55 historic chimneys. And there was something about the mass and the weight of these structures that was incredibly compelling. Not only are they architecturally significant and historically significant, but as these kind of megalithic and obelisk-like or totemic structures, their presence, right, is something that many people took note of, not just us. And so we began annotating, we began creating an artifact catalog, a historic resource inventory that included information about the architectural significance of these structures, which belonged to mid-century homes, which belonged to um, uh, colonial revival homes, to Pali cod homes, and then also chimneys that belonged to notable Palisadians like Reverend Charles Scott, who's one of the founding Methodist Episcopals who founded the Pacific Palisades as a spiritual retreat and gathering place for the Methodists. And then we also noted which chimneys had certain design features that may have more contemporary value in our site. But I want to just point out one which was quite beautiful that still resonates a lot with me, which is located on the middle row on the far left, which is one of the chimneys at Will Rogers State Park, his former ranch house. And that chimney is constructed of rustic creek stones. So in the Pacific Palisades, there's a creek called Rustic Creek, and there's Rustic Canyon. And those round stones were harnessed from that creek and assembled in the early days to build that chimney. And so there's a site-specific building material that was used to build that, something that's only found in the Palisades and something that is an integral part of its history and the development of that region. And so, in our thinking, we realized that all of these chimneys are different. All of them responded to the homes differently. The chimneys provided evidence about the ways that the ways that domestic spaces were designed and how people were intended to gather around many of these central masonry structures, being the hearth, being the fireplace. And so in looking at all of them in a grid like this, we were able to see that they embody design development over the past 150 years, and they all carry their own material history, as well as the history of the architects and designers and builders, but also the homeowners. So in response to this project, we got multiple letters of support. One of those letters came from Adrian Scott Fine, President and CEO of Los Angeles Conservancy, where he wrote, "Etched in the minds of many Angelenos are the post-fire images of entire residential blocks razed, save for the chimneys, standing defiantly. The chimneys have quickly become symbols of the heart of lost homes and the endurance of the community." So as our project developed, we knew that we couldn't save 55 megalithic chimney structures. So we decreased that number to about 12, around actually 12 or 15, and then began making phone calls to see which ones could be salvaged, which homeowners would be interested in a project like this, and which seemed like feasible for extraction and relocation. And so at the center of this is families, right? Again, we really want to make sure that everybody knows that, the preservation work is important. It's important to save the architecture, but the heart of this, the soul of this is the families and the stories that we can all relate to. And so for me, one of the most beautiful parts of this project and process has been getting to know some of these families. We will be conducting further, more in-depth interviews and getting more insight from these families, but all of the initial conversations about what was lost and some of their fond memories of the homes and how long they've been living in the Palisades have all humanized the calamity and also just built a greater sense of empathy for this work. And so we have the Erdleys who had been there since 1959, and Hal, unfortunately, he was at the age of 99 when the fire happened, and just 6 weeks after the fire, he passed away. And so his family has been, recovering from that, they've been moving forward. But it's hard to it's hard to think or even imagine the level of disruption that may have taken place for multiple families in the Palisades, that weren't just hit with a fire, but other things as well. And then we have the Case Fair family, who had been there since 1960. We had a family in Malibu, Craig Hill and Hashi Clark. Craig had been there since 1970, and he was a fifth-generation Californian. Then we have Ed and Linda Butwinick, who were residents since 1966 and were founders of the Brentwood Art Center, which has been a staple in the art community on the West Side since the 70s. And then we have Reba Sofer and her family. And Reba, she was a historian. She is a historian, and she is an author still currently. And she was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, I believe, in 1995. And she's a professor emeritus at Cal State Northridge. And then we have families that we got to know through this process that whose chimneys we were not able to save, unfortunately. But those families, their oral histories have been reported, and we're going to find some way to integrate them into the final memorial as well. So all of that background being said, our goal, right, is to create a memorial, the Palisades Fire Memorial, which was unanimously voted in favor of or for by the Palisades Community Council just a few months ago. And so we have the support of the community to go forward with this initiative. But of course, it's going to require a lot of fundraising, and it's going to require the designation of land. And this is a long-term project. But when we're thinking about preservation and how to preserve these structures where the building is no longer standing and where the properties have to be cleared by the Army Corps or by private contractors in order to prepare for new buildings, we have to think about where what was salvaged can go or can live, and what type of life it can have beyond the home that it once belonged to. And so in its simplest form, right, the Palisades Fire Memorial will be a collection and assembly of 7 freestanding chimneys that have been salvaged. And to date, we are really excited to announce that we have 6 of those 7 chimneys that have been saved, which we'll go through individually. And Alan will talk about scanning them, and Ian will talk about the extraction methods for them. But it's taken 7+ months to get those 6 chimneys. But when we're thinking about this memorial, right, it's a place for memory, it's a place for community, it's a place for gathering. It's a place that can tell us, can speak to us from the past about the future and in the future. And so I guess we invite you to think about what these chimneys are, right? They're not chimneys in the sense that you can start a fire in them and they should be operational again. No, they're taking on another ontological status, right? Their being is being changed by this process. They were chimneys, and we'll still refer to them as chimneys, but they're actually something else. And they are telling us something else. And they're carrying the memory of the homes, and they're carrying the memory of the architects, and they're carrying the memory of the homeowners, but they're also going to be doing something new. So I just invite you to think about that as we go through the extraction methods, and hopefully some folks can give us some ideas about what the chimneys might be saying. I just want to end with 2 more quick quotes. This is coming from Carol Quillen, President and CEO of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. She said, "This project is a bold and innovative undertaking that will preserve the only surviving physical structures from the January 2025 fires in the Pacific Palisades. The lone masonry chimneys that millions around the world came to recognize as symbols of the devastation of the fires and the resilience of the communities who would persevere and rebuild." And another quote from Timothy P. Whalen, director of the Getty Conservation Institute. He said, "From a conservation perspective, the memorial stands as an invaluable addition to our cultural landscape alongside important Los Angeles landmarks like the Eames House, the Schindler House, and other architectural icons." And I'll just throw in Chris Burden's Urban Light at the LACMA is another reference. All right, and I'm going to pass this off to Ian, who has come on board for this project and devoted countless hours of time because he believed in the mission and the vision and flew out from New Jersey to work on this and has done an exceptional job tackling unprecedented challenges in a disaster zone with all types of constraints and challenges that he'll explain. So thank you, Ian. Go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. It was a privilege to have the opportunity to work in accomplishing this vision. From the initial stages, I was inspired by the vision that was given to Evan to create this memorial. Um, the initially there we started in March having pre-construction meetings. So I guess you could go to the next slide. Um, so yeah, so there was a team of consultants that were essentially assembled by Evan gradually as individuals that coalesced into a team in early April. Um, uh, in March a little bit too, and we had regular calls around specific deliverables. So I took on the role of being essentially the technical director of how to physically accomplish this vision. Um, we had a lot of other contributors, which you can see in this slide, including engineers, architects, and other masonry professionals. So initially, the the complications associated with this vision um, were were although they were discussed, they the depth of them was not something that could be fully comprehended until we were into the actual process. So I would say that the we were up against some very difficult time deadlines that were associated with the requirements of FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers. So they had a deadline to uh, remove the remains of houses off of properties by June 30th. That process began way before June 30th. So throughout the end of May, April, and June, they were clearing sites. So in order for us to acquire these chimneys, we had to extract them prior to the contractors who were directed by Army Corps of Engineers demolishing each of the remains of the properties. So ordinarily we would have you know we would have an opportunity to do investigation, a design phase, create schedules. That we didn't have that. We didn't have those luxuries due to the time constraints. In addition to that, we had resource constraints. So the um, the majority of the initial investment of personnel of talent was pro bono. So the entire pre-construction team, we were basically doing this because we supported the vision and believed in the initiative. And that that's great, but we had to get physical resources such as equipment and material, which vendors require money for that. So we were limited in terms of what we could purchase and what we could acquire due to funding constraints. So that altered the extraction processes, and in addition to that, access was a challenge. As most of you know, that there was restricted access to the Palisades for quite a while, and also there was hazardous conditions there, and each of the individual property sites that we extracted the chimneys from had different challenges in terms of just accessing the chimneys, which we'll discuss specifically as we get to each individual chimney. So there were some initial work plans developed by Captive CNP that were done independently of my involvement, and I was asked to develop also essentially a work plan, a procedure plan, in addition to a rough order of magnitude cost association with acquiring the materials and the labor and everything that we just discussed. And both my plan and Capta's were very similar, which was reassuring. I developed it further. I developed it further, and I've extracted large masonry masses in the past in a similar methodology. So this is something that I had executed prior. Once I developed some essentially narrative plan that were and a couple details, I ran some rough calculations based on the weight of the chimneys and the segments that we anticipated moving, and then figured out the required material to support those weights during the extraction. And then just to double check, I ran it past probably one of my favorite engineers, Mel Green, to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. And once he confirmed that my plan looked good on paper, then that was our working methodology to extract the chimneys. Yeah, and essentially, and each of the chimneys, as you'll see, since there was not time nor the resources to do any investigation, we had to basically put one foot in front of the other before we really knew the conditions of each chimney. I mean, there wasn't even probes done. We didn't know the reinforcement. We didn't know the interior withes. We didn't know much other than the outside appearance of the chimney. So it was constant improvising, and also the conditions in terms of the timeline, which I mentioned earlier, evolved throughout the process. As the Army Corps moved from property to property, it was essentially like we had a shadow following us to different locations. We had to structure our efforts to stay ahead of them, and the complexity of the situation they were dealing with is hard to overestimate. So it was a constant moving target in terms of timing, which presented a lot of complications for us. And yeah, we contacted Alan, and had him prepare to scan the chimneys. So he'll tell you about that.
Thanks, Ian. So Acquire was contacted by Evan and Ian in May of this year with an urgent requirement to document these chimneys. Digitally preserving the current condition would serve two primary purposes. One, providing an immediate planning tool for the imminent dismantling, and two, provide a reliable resource for the reconstruction later. We proposed the use of terrestrial 3D laser scanning and photogrammetry to develop high-resolution photo-textured digital models of the chimneys. A Leica RTC 360 was used to rapidly and precisely measure the elements of each chimney, visible from multiple vantage points at ground level, capturing several 100 million measurements across the surfaces, generating a point cloud, a reliable geometric basis for the development of the final digital models. Next slide, please. And one more. A DJI Mavic 3 drone was then used to capture hundreds of images around each chimney, providing total coverage, including the areas that were not visible to the laser scanner from ground level, such as the various horizontal surfaces of the chimney tops and mantles. Next slide. Through a process of photogrammetry, where overlapping photos are analyzed to determine the precise position and orientation from which they were taken, and then to place each pixel of each image in its relative position in 3D space, another, more comprehensive point cloud can be produced. Constrained by and scaled against the laser scan data, the result is a rich cloud of verified, accurate data. That cloud is then used to generate a surface mesh onto which the high-resolution photos can be projected in order to produce the final photo-textured models. Evan, if you go back one, there's a QR code there which you can follow, and it will take you to a collection of the models that we produced. You can view them on a phone or a desktop computer, and I'll put links to those in the chat shortly. That slide. Each step of the process results in useful, perhaps critical data resources. The laser scan data, which was made available within 24 hours of collecting it, became a critical tool for Ian and his team, whether they were trying to determine the size and reach of equipment needed to extract the chimney, to determine the overall size of the chimneys, assessing the number of bricks, or perhaps even the mass of each section to be lifted. You can follow the QR code on the screen here. So I go back one, to view the point cloud for one of the sites. Again, I'll put that link in the chat in a bit. From there, you can view the data. You can walk around it in a kind of panoramic image walkthrough. Next slide. The photo-textured model then becomes a resource for more precise planning, considering exactly where to make cuts and so forth. It can be used as a collaborative tool for describing the work to various team members, the owners, the masons, and the other stakeholders. It also becomes another form of media that can be used to showcase the project as Evan continues to promote the project through social and news media. Next slide. The final deliverable provided by Acquire is a set of orthographic images generated directly from the models. These high-resolution scaled elevations are presented on CAD drawing sheets that can serve in the development of the final memorial design, for indexing the position of each and every brick and component, and perhaps most importantly, to serve as verification that one day the reconstructed chimneys are not just analogues of what once was, but they are authentic artifacts that truly symbolize resilience and heritage. Evan, back to you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you again. Great. So now we're going to just go into talking briefly about the 6 chimneys that we have preserved. I want to just take a quick break to give us some other visual material to enjoy.
There's a new LA wildfire memorial effort.
Let me know. Can you hear that? Can you hear the sound all right? Okay, super. This is just going to be 2 minutes, but this provides just nice visuals to see what we'll be talking about.
There's a new LA wildfire memorial effort working to preserve chimneys from the homes that burned in the Pacific Palisades.
Yeah, more than half a dozen are being carefully removed from burn sites. KCAL's Nick Zetchovich shows us what's unique about these chimneys.
The chimney was always designed to be in context and conversation with the rest of the building. So when the chimney is decontextualized, chimneys actually are taking on another life.
Seared and soot-stained, these brick and mortar monoliths tower over the twisted metal and scorched landscape.
Those interior bricks are really important.
Evan Hall, founder of the House Museum, is racing to preserve these last vestiges of a lost architectural era, pieces of history balancing on the brick.
We're living and navigating through history, and we have to try to understand it more, and what better way than to literally get into it.
Chimney was once the centerpiece of a home designed by Richard Neutra, a visionary Austrian architect who helped define modernism in Southern California. Today, it's all that remains.
we knew something about Neutra. When you hear Neutra's name come up, no, oh yeah, we live in one of those.
For Raven and Daniel Case, who grew up in this house, the memories outweigh the architectural significance.
For 65 years, we were here for every important birthday, anniversary. We had 2 weddings in the backyard.
And one during the pandemic.
Yeah.
My son, Dylan.
Weighing over 10 tons, moving this chimney is a delicate dance with gravity and history.
We have to think about creative solutions to salvage some remnant of the architectural history that was lost.
Team is getting ready here to start disassembling the chimney, and what they're doing is cutting through that brick and mortar with a really large saw, inserting steel beams into those cuts. Those beams will serve as support to begin removing that chimney section by section.
This work is more important now than ever because it helps to tell us who we are and where we come from and whose shoulders we're, riding on. We're doing legacy work.
Its intended use as a heat source may not have gotten much use.
Well,
I have no memory of the fireplace being turned on.
That was hardly ever used.
Will soon serve a greater purpose.
This home was such an important part of our life. And, the fact that it might live on in some more tangible way is great.
Yeah, we're thrilled.
2 chimneys down.
Right.
5 to go.
In the Pacific Palisades, executive KCAL News.
There's a new LA.
Okay, so that was the that was the Richard Neutra chimney, which was actually the second chimney that we were able to successfully salvage. And as you can see through the footage, it was a very dynamic process with multiple laborers and masons that had come out and volunteered to help with the heritage recovery effort. And I believe that salvage lasted about 3 or 4 days. And those days started at 7 a.m. and ended in the afternoon. But I think because we have to be mindful of time, I think we should go through the other chimneys and just briefly talk about their history and then the extraction method, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. We have about 15 or so minutes. So the Kappe chimney was built in 1959 for Hal Early and his family. And Kappe was the founder of SCI-Arch, the Southern Californian Institute of Architecture. And within his architectural career, he designed over 100 homes. This property is actually, its blueprints are at the Getty Research Institute, and there's also a scale model there, which we've looked at. And one interesting thing about this chimney and fireplace is that the chimney was connected to the fireplace, and the fireplace had this concrete block surround, which was a part of the living space. It separated the living room from another living space, and so the extension of the hearth really, in a sense, was at the heart of the home. And in his drawings, there's like a area for like a built-in fish tank, and it's very unique, let's say, and specific to the Earthlies. But actually, this chimney was tipped prematurely by the Army Corps of Engineers. They had not given us notice they had given us notice that they were circling, but they did tip the chimney prematurely. And so we were able to salvage some of the concrete block wall, in addition to some of the pieces that had fallen onto the property lot within the ash footprint. But I'll let Ian describe more of that process.
Yeah, quickly, since this was tipped, we were able to salvage the individual masonry units, which were more fragile than most of the other chimneys, from the fallen segments. Individually, we scored the joints to pull them apart by hand after after we scored them with a diamond wheel to impact the units as least as possible. And there was this was the first chimney. It was prior to us assembling a cohesive team, and the methods were. It worked well, but they were not ideal. Obviously, we would have liked to extract the chimney in like more monolithic segments.
Next chimney that we were able to get was the Louise Randall Pearson chimney, and this is a chimney that was owned by Craig Hill and Hashi Clark in Malibu, and was built in 1949 by Louise and her family themselves. And there's an article in Better Homes and Gardens from this time that describes her process of actually salvaging these bricks from another property in Los Angeles, another building in Los Angeles. So in a sense, our salvaging of the bricks was a reiteration, or let's say recurrence of her initial salvaging of those bricks for her own chimney. And she was known for her screenwriting and her autobiography titled Roughly Speaking, which was produced by, which had a film produced by Warner Brothers Studios about her life and about her family in 1945. And this is an image of that chimney. These are, this is the Haxton team disassembling it brick by brick. Go ahead again.
Right. So similar to, in some sense, we ended up disassembling this masonry unit by unit, similar to the prior chimney. The difference being that the prerequisite conditions which caused us to do that were very different. We could not access the chimney with equipment due to the footprint of the house that was essentially impeding our access. So we assembled scaffold. I taught the guys how to extract individual masonry units, which was challenging on this particular chimney because it was extraordinarily hard Portland rich material that was used to assemble these salvaged bricks. And you could see evidence of erosion due to the incompatibility and the inappropriate hardness of the mortar. But we managed to have a team of 11 laborers and apprentices from Haxton that were able to pull it together.
And then later, it was a collaborative effort. And I also just want to say that, you know, all of the work, the physical work that was done, was led by Ian, but we have a huge amount of gratitude to the masonry community that's really stepped up to care for these structures. I mean, this is their craft, this is their building material, and they've really advocated for the preservation of these structures and sent out multiple teams over multiple days, over multiple months to carefully disassemble these structures. And we've heard from them that this has been a very positive project for them because it's allowed them to collaborate with one another, and it's in a sense united the masonry industry, and it's gathered them around a cause that is not for profit, but a cause that they're all in a beautiful way taking ownership of. You know, this is their craft, and so that leads me to this next chimney, which is the Higgins brick chimney. And this chimney was constructed of Higgins bricks, and the Higgins brick family had started this company in 1927 and sourced local clays from Santa Monica Bay and Los Angeles area to produce all types of bricks. This specific brick is a jumbo brick. It's a larger brick. I'm forgetting the exact width, but they're not, you know, they're not your average size. And so during their the business's operations, they produced over 4.5 billion bricks in Los Angeles and for Los Angeles. And we were grateful to have Josh Higgins come out himself to look at some of these chimneys and talk about his family's history and assess whether or not multiple chimneys were built of his family's bricks, and he determined that there were, and he was able to find the Higgins brick signature on them. And so while we're dealing with architectural history, there's building material history as well. And for me, one of the most beautiful ideas is that these some of these bricks are oceanic bricks, right? They're coming from the Santa Monica Bay, and they're site specific, they're local resources. And so it's important for us to, as we think about rebuilding, it's important to think about and prioritize local building materials so that Los Angeles can have homes and structures built from the materials that it's sitting on top of. That's just very important. So Ian, go ahead and talk about it.
So the challenges associated with this chimney had to do with its size. It was a very large chimney, and in addition to that, the debris that occupied the site, we actually had to physically clear it in order to provide access to the telehandler. We were able to segment this and pull it out in large sections. It ended up being 5 sections due to the weight. One of the positive aspects of this stage of our process was that we had some experienced workforce that had participated in some of the prior chimney removals, and that was a consistent challenge for us, because since the very generous masonry contractors were donating their labor to us, so the crew was constantly changing. And as most of you know, having consistency on a project is really important for success. But this was a gratifying experience because it was such a large chimney, and we were able to extract it in pretty large segments.
The next chimney, just being mindful of time, was the chimney located on Bienvenida Avenue, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, who was the grandson of Frank Lloyd Wright. And he had his own architectural practice where he prioritized organic building materials, and had his own firm, and also founded the Wright Organic Resource Center in Malibu. And I mean, his legacy goes without saying.
So we were able to extract this chimney as one monolithic unit, which was great. It was also made it our heaviest extraction. I estimated it to be approximately 8,000 pounds. It was quite a challenge to transport this to our temporary storage area due to the height of the chimney, extracting it in one piece. But we managed to get it there, and once we did, we were very grateful.
And this was a sight to behold, because for those that know the topography and the landscape of the Palisades, it's very irregular. There are slopes and curves and cliffs, and this chimney was driving on Sunset, and then it went up a hill, and then it went off-roading, and somehow Ian made sure that it was secure and it made it safely. So that was a definite miracle.
Next chimney.
Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm seeing that spinning wheel. Ian, do you want to talk about the Beryl Mercer chimney while my screen pops up to us?
So the barrel Mercer chimney, we also had to extract in individual units, which is obviously not the preferred way to transport the chimney, and that was due to the fact that the bridge to the property had burned, so our access was very limited. But this chimney had a more appropriate mortar, and the extraction process was far less onerous than it was on either of the two other chimneys that we extracted as individual masonry units. You want to talk about the history of the chimney a little bit, Evan?
Sorry, my computer is frozen.
Okay, I can talk briefly about so that chimney was the Burrow Mercer chimney, which is which was British-born actress who from 1929 to 1939 was in over 35 films, one of which was All Quiet on the Western Front and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Um, and we were able to save that chimney.
Sorry about that. I'm back. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so yeah, so why all of this matters? I mean, we're gonna wrap this up now, but I mean, I don't even think that we need to explain why this matters. I mean, we're amongst preservationists that understand the value of history and the built environment and visual culture. Like this is, of course, this matters. Um, I I have been in the Palisades, you know, every week for the last few months, and it's quite jarring seeing how quickly the landscape is changing. Um, while it is hopeful and positive that the debris is being cleared, it's also simultaneously jarring because what you see is just empty lots with hardly any markers of the former structures that once stood there, which is a form of visual and cultural erasure. And I remember, going through that list in our artifact catalog of the over 55 historic chimneys and watching them go, one by one. And that experience of loss is something, that I think I would imagine that all of us have felt. But on this scale, it was quite, let's just say, intense and jarring. And and so there's something about the fallow land and the almost farm-like quality um, to the empty lots right now. And so while there's a lot of conversations about what will be built and what types of building materials will be used and what type of architects will come in and what styles will come in, it's important for us to not forget what was there. And I know that we have very short memories and history is often forgotten. But the chimneys, right, are intended to stand as reminders of the residents that many of whom will not rebuild, residents that are forever gone from the Palisades, but also the architectural loss, right? The loss of Neutras, multiple Neutras, 3 Neutras that were lost in the Palisades. But then they'll also stand as educational tools, right, to teach the next generation about what was there and how important masonry construction is and how it is a fire resilient building material and how it is a testimony of its strength that they are that is the material that survived and did prevent some properties from burning. But then, the memorial is also important because community gathering is important, and the community needs a place to gather. And we are designed for this to be one of the many future community gathering places, but just a place of reflection and a place also of encounter, like where you're not just thinking about the past, but a place where you're encountering the past and where the past is actually encountering us. And that may not be comfortable for everybody, but it's a process of healing that's required to look at these relics of such a colossal disaster, but also the demarcating point for a new Palisades and a new chapter for the west side of Los Angeles. And I also should have said this in the beginning, but we're if we could have worked on both the Ean Fire and the Palisades Fire, we could have, but clearly you can see that this has been a lot of work, but we are supportive of the work that's being done on the east side, and we're in support of organizations like the Altadena Foothill Catalog and others that are doing very, very important preservation and architectural historical work. Next slide. Great. So yeah, you can keep up with all of us and see the work that we're doing that is happening in real time. There's no shortage of beautiful imagery on our social media platforms and also on our newsletter. So you can visit www.house.museum to find information, but also follow Significant Structures and Acquire on Instagram. And last, of course, but not least, please, consider donating, consider partnering with us on the next leg of this journey, which is going to be probably the more expensive part of this. But it takes community to do work that will impact communities, not just in LA, but global communities. And so we invite collaborators, we invite all forms of expertise. And yeah, we quite simply need your support. So thank you all. And I guess we'll move into Q&A now.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Ian. That was great. I really enjoyed that. Even having been involved in the project, I learned a lot about the breadth and depth of what you've been doing there. So that was really great. Thank you. I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any questions, but I don't believe you answered everything that everyone wants to know. So if you have anything, please do stick it in the chat, or perhaps even unmute yourself and ask directly. We're not opposed to that. So Dennis has a question about the location for the memorial.
So the location is still to be determined. We are desiring for it to be on public land, but there's a process for getting public land designated. That includes giving a presentation before the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy, which we were scheduled to be on their agenda, but we need a little bit more time to make the right case for the right location. I mean, there's like thousands of acres, but ideally, there's thousands of acres in the Santa Monica Mountain Range, but ideally, the memorial will be located somewhere in the Pacific Palisades for the Palisades community, the immediate Palisades community.
Thank you. Alan Merson asks, is the Getty supporting the efforts?
That is a good question, Alan. In due time. Let's say in due time.
Thank you. Anything else? So Evan, your recovery of the chimneys, is that now complete? What are your immediate next objectives?
Yeah, so we have one more chimney to get because our goal is to get 7. We have 6. The 7th will likely emerge from somewhere, but we are I guess watching and waiting to see how the rebuild takes place. Many homeowners have, not many, but few homeowners have decided to keep their chimneys and integrate them into their future homes, but there will be costs associated with that, building code requirements for that, and other kind of unforeseen challenges. And so we're monitoring the, I don't want to say monitoring, but we're circling back to some of the homeowners who were in our initial list of the 55 plus identified historic chimneys to see how their process is going, because some of those are still standing.
Okay.
Are all of the lots available for rebuilding? Is there predatory development happening? I mean, that seems to happen sometimes in a disaster.
There is. I can't speak to it with very clear evidence, but there, I believe, have been over 150 property lots that have gone up for sale. Some homeowners have been forced to sell because their insurance is not covering the cost for the new rebuild. And generally, what I've heard is that most homeowners are underinsured. There's always some out-of-pocket funds that will have to come forward to build what was. And so, there are multiple lots that are for sale, and will likely be more. Who is buying those lots? That is to be determined. But there are some Palisadians that have moved to different lots, which is positive, right? There's been movement within the community to larger lots, to maybe more desirable lots. But those lots are open to the public, so it's surely there's.
I guess a follow-up, is there a possibility of making this a historic district?
That's a good question. That was actually something that was brought up with our contact Lindsay Mulcahy at LA Conservancy many months ago. We should circle back to that. That's a good thought. I think at the time things were moving so quickly, it seems challenging to get it designated to preserve what was. But yeah, I mean, it brings up a good question. Like, well, if it's a historic, you'd have to define what the historic district is and what those specific structures are, or what that street is. But there's a strong advocate for history, Donna Vaccarino, who's part of the Pacific Palisades Historical Society, and she's fighting for the historic core of the Palisades. And that includes a number of scattered kind of buildings that are still intact. So maybe the historic core can be designated. That's a great thought.
Jim Regal asks about where the chimneys have been located currently. It looks like Ian has a couple in his backyard there.
It's an undisclosed location in the Palisades. But if you'd like to schedule a visit, we can coordinate something.
That sounds great. Jean Guy asks, is there a significance to the number of 7 total chimneys?
There is, yes, but that will have to be come out in another statement as the memorial takes on its life and gets named, and as the artwork coalesces more. Yeah.
Okay. Keeping us engaged. That'll be fun to find out. Do we have any other questions? Michelle put a good point in the chat there that we should everyone here should be following WCAPT on Instagram to see what we're up to. This webinar actually totally by accident is actually the first in a series of events about dismantling. We're actually in the process of organizing an event with ARG and KC Restoration about the Wayfarers Chapel, which will be an interesting one. Hopefully next month, but we're still working on that. So follow along to see when that comes up. I'm seeing some kudos here from Chris and from Margaret. Well done for getting the international coverage in the Guardian newspaper, and thanks for the informative presentation. I think if there's nothing else, we can wrap up right there. And thank you again for your time and for your for this look into this project. It's been quite fascinating. And as I mentioned at the start, the session has been recorded, so we'll put this up on our WCAPT YouTube channel at some point soon. For those who weren't able to make it, or those who want to go back and sit and hear the show again. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having us.